Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. This is Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. We are Kenny and Renny, and this is our weekly Kenny and Renny show where we like to catch up with some of the heavyweights of the sports journalism industry and get their stories behind them. We got a great show here today. Going to be joined by Kelly Hrudey in about 10 minutes from now. And later in the show, Mike Zeisberger is back. If you've been watching this show, you'll remember, hey, the Kenny and Renny show is all about the technical issues that we have on the show time and time again. And that was one of our best. It took Zeiss about 25 minutes to get on the show. So we had about 5 to 7 minutes to spend with him. So we promised him we wanted to catch up with him and get him back. And he's back, and we couldn't be happier because in an industry that is filled with great human beings, Mike Zeisberger may just be the best, and I know Kenny feels that way too. Right there alongside Mike Zeisberger is Ken Wiebe, who I'm so proud to call my partner. Ken, how are you doing here today?
Doing excellent, Sean. Thank you. How about yourself? We've had a busy 24 hours or so, haven't we?
Well, we're in the middle of the grind, right? And it's funny, we brought up, we were talking to some of the people. We talked to Jen for our second round preview show about the kind of grind that the Hockey Night in Canada people go through throughout the playoffs. And someone in the chat room had said, going out and playing 3 overtimes, that's a grind. What you guys are talking about isn't a grind. And I'm not disputing that athletes have, crazy stuff that they have to go through. But it gets busy at this time of year. And there's a lot going on, and basically our days are bouncing from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying we're in our busy time. I kind of start running around like I have my hair on fire. Yeah. I'm not going to say it. But Ken, we should get and talk a little bit about the Winnipeg Jets. And what we saw from them in game 1. What did you feel you saw? Everyone's talking rest versus rust. Did you think that played a factor?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's an excuse, but certainly part of the reason that the Jets were flat. They lost their kind of edge, I guess, if you will. And I mean, again, I think that Blake Wheeler did mention that after the game that it's hard to stay sharp over that long period of time. I do agree that that's the case. And for people who think that it is an excuse, well, look no further than 2018. I mean, look how the Jets looked in game 1 against Vegas. You hate to say easily winning the opener, but they were able to win the opener quite handily. And after that, they ran out of gas. I think the tank wasn't empty, but it certainly was not at a full value. So the rest issue for me, Sean, comes into bigger play as the series moves along. With 3 games in 4 days coming up, we know it's an emotionally charged atmosphere after what happened late in Wednesday's game. We know that the Canadians have now won 4 games in a row and are riding an emotional high, but we also know the Jets now have an opportunity to, we always hear about that adversity word. It was a common and prevalent theme during the Zoom calls. And now let's see how a team responds. You have a great plan until someone punches you in the face. The Jets have essentially been punched in the face by their opponent. They got away from the patient style of play that had been so successful for them in the opening round. They didn't defend the same way, and they were not able to generate as much offense, although it was important for them, I think, to get that 3rd goal against Carey Price late with the extra attacker after that brilliant play by Nikolai Ehlers to Kyle Connor. But we didn't see enough offense generated from the lines that followed the top line. I thought that Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, and Kyle Connor generated plenty during the course of the game in terms of offensive zone time and chances, but they just weren't necessarily connecting the same way that we expected. And then obviously there was it's still struggling to find the words. Tough, somber way to end a good hockey game.
Yeah, I think that you're right in that late push where they made it a 4-3 game, scored with the extra man. I think that's really an important goal. I know that they didn't come back and win that game, but it allowed them to at least get that bit of belief that they were able to build up in that Edmonton Oilers series. I think they're able to carry that forward, that feeling that they're never out of a game, that they've got the ability to score their way back into a game. The idea, though, of the maybe that rest versus rust thing coming into play later in the series, I wonder about that, because we can always think of examples of a team kind of running out of gas. I think 2018 and the Jets is an excellent example of that with what that series against Nashville took out of them. But I was talking to someone yesterday, and I'd also said, take a look at the St. Louis Blues when they went on their run. They go 6 games, 7 games, 6 games, 7 games. A lot of grinds. The Dallas Stars 7-game series in there that ends in, I believe, double overtime. Ken, am I getting that right? Yeah, double overtime. I mean, that's a grind right there. And going up against the Boston Bruins, that's no easy team to grind against in 7 games. And the Winnipeg Jets taking their pound of flesh in the 6 games. St. Louis Blues were able to get past that. I think they could get past that because they were a team built for the playoffs. We love to use that line. So I guess I wonder, this is the question about the Montreal Canadiens, how that roster is constructed. Is that a team that's built for the playoffs, built to endure the kind of lulls in energy that you could expect after going 7 games and having to take on a team that's fresh like the Winnipeg Jets should be?
Yeah, I mean, we know that we talked about depth a lot going into the series, and the Canadiens' depth was on display. Their fourth line played a lot more than the Jets' fourth line, I believe, and they got an important contribution from both Corey Perry and Eric Stahl. We know that the Canadiens lean heavily on their top 2 pairings on the back end. And yeah, that we should say there too. That is great news that Jake Evans was walking back from the arena today. And Cuthbert said this is not a medical, update, but to get a thumbs up in terms of the status. I mean, that's what everyone wants to see. I mean, that was a scary scene. Shauna was right in front of us. We saw that player get taken off in a stretcher. You just don't see that very often, and you hate to see it. So good to see that he's feeling better and up and at him. So when it comes to their roster, I mean, man, they have depth. There's no doubt about that. I mean, can the defense hold up? I mean, that's a lot of minutes for Weber and Sherratt and Edmondson and Petrie. Brett Kulak got involved a little bit more yesterday, but both teams have depth. I mean, are they built to go 4 rounds? Man, that only time will tell. We won't go too far. I mean, I don't think the series is over by any stretch of the imagination. No. It was a tightly played game, and I think that the Jets can play a lot better than they did yesterday, and they were right in it until the end. So in terms of the Canadiens, how much can the Canadiens elevate, Sean? To me, the big question is this. Can they elevate their game much higher with a lack of rest coming up with 3 games in 4 nights? That, to me, is the critical piece of this equation. We know Carey Price is going to be difficult for the Jets to beat. I think that Connor Hellebuck, I don't think he had a poor game by any stretch, but I think he'll get better when he gets into the rhythm of these games, which is what we will see happening with 3 in the next 4 days. And I think the Jets, it's funny, both teams have an opportunity to use this as a rallying point. Who can handle their emotions better will ultimately help determine who wins this game. Obviously, we know it's going to be tough for the Jets. They're likely going to be without Mark Scheifele. I expect them to be without Dylan DeMello. And Paul Stastny is obviously not at full health, though I do anticipate he will be back in the lineup for Game 2. This is similar to what happened in August, but the Jets didn't lose 3 players in one game, nor are all those players not coming back. So there are some similarities, but it is entirely different. So it's a big test emotionally for both of these teams. The Montreal Canadiens are going to need to be disciplined. Obviously, there is a retribution element that often comes with the game, but the Canadiens understand they can't afford to be putting the Jets on the power play, and they can't be. We saw this in Calgary. The Jets spent a lot of time chasing Matthew Tkachuk around the ice, and it hurt them, right? I mean, it hurt them throughout the course of the series. They finally got past it, and then they started playing okay, but they just couldn't generate enough offense. So discipline is going to be absolutely critical. We know the referees will be watching things closely, Sean. I mean, if you say things publicly and something happens where the whole eye for an eye situation tries to occur, there will be consequences, much like there will be consequences for Mark Scheifele.
Well, I thought it was brilliant of Paul Maurice to kind of do what he could to snuff that out immediately after the game when the comments from Joel Edmondson came out, and he basically said that if Mark Scheifele returns to the series, they're going to make his life a living hell or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. But Paul Maurice, I thought it was a pretty smart, savvy thing for him to say. No one would be stupid enough to make a threat before heading into a game. Of course, we're going back to alluding to, the stuff that happened with Todd Bertuzzi way back in the day. Yeah. But I think that was a mistake by Joel Edmondson to say that. And I think that Paul Maurice jumped immediately on that mistake by saying that, because now he's put it in a situation where he's basically shone the light on the idea that is basically a threat, and no one should be stupid enough to say that. He's pointed the light on it, and I think that puts the Canadians in a situation where they'll have to be careful about how they conduct themselves going forward, and they can't look in any manner, to your point, that the refs are going to be on it to make sure that doesn't happen. But I don't think after a comment like that, the Canadians can look in any manner like they are out for retribution if and most likely when Mark Scheifele returns to the playoffs. We're going to drop that because our first guest is ready to go, and we're so happy to have him. We've wanted Kelly Hrudey on for a long time. We wanted to wait for the playoffs because playoff Kelly Hrudey is the best version of Kelly Hrudey. So happy to have you on the show, Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm well, Sean and Ken. How are you guys?
We're doing
awesome.
Great.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Kelly's so happy to have you. I didn't know this about you, so I've known this about certain players. I think Ed Jovanovski is one of the guys who qualifies for this. Michel Goulet back in the day, one of these players that started hockey very late in their career. I believe in both cases, those players were 12 years old when they came to the game, and I've always found it remarkable when you think, especially in this day and age, what kids learn from the age of 5 to 12 to pick up the game at that age and make the NHL is unbelievable. You are one of these players who had a very late start to the game, aren't you?
I was. I'm the same way. I started at 12. I actually wanted to start playing organized hockey when I was 11, but my mom and dad, I went to them and asked them, and they gave me great advice. They said, no, you have to learn how to skate for a year. So every day after school, I'd go to the community outdoor rink, right, and learn how to skate, play shinny with all my friends, and so on. I had no idea what position I was going to play, by the way. And the only reason I wanted to join organized hockey, Ken and Sean, was simply because I was missing my friends. Most of them were in organized hockey, right? So during the other months of the year, we'd play ball hockey and road hockey and football and baseball and tennis and all this. So we had lots of activity together, but I was missing them in the winter. That's exactly why I wanted to join organized hockey, is for no other reason.
How'd you get attracted to the goaltending position then, Kelly?
Okay, so there's another, to me it's interesting anyway. So my buddy and I, it might have been around July or August, and tryouts are coming up in September. And I remember that simply because the World Series was going on, and I loved baseball, and the Oakland A's were big at the time. And anyways, my buddy and I were in his backyard playing ball hockey, and my buddy asked me, Jeff Marshall said, what position do you think you want to play? And I said, I have no idea. And at around the same time, his dad, Mr. Marshall, came out of the house, and he heard our conversation. And honestly, he said something like, I don't want to, persuade you too much or anything, Kelly, but whenever I watch all the neighborhood kids play ball hockey and you're in the net, you stop the ball way more than everybody else. So that was it. I was like, okay. So I thought I'll try it. And then, of course, I went out and tried, and because I hadn't played organized hockey and I was so far behind everybody, I kept getting cut, right? So I just kept getting lower and lower and lower, and I was fine with that. I had no issue, and I just really enjoyed it. And playing goal is such a challenging position anyways. Every day is different, and remains so when I played in the National Hockey League. Every day seems to be a different journey or path.
So Kelly, explain to me how you get there that quick. How do you get from a place where you don't even know what you want to be, where neighborhood people are recognizing a talent in you? How do you get from that in that short 6-year or whatever span it is, from going from being a guy who didn't know the game at all, who had to take a year and learn how to skate before your parents would even let you play? Right. Talk about your path and some of the major things that happened along that way that got you to the point that you were an NHL player or NHL ready player. Yeah,
so I guess if I were to sort of look back on it, I would say that I was really driven. So, now that I'm 60 years old and I kind of look back on it, I think some of the things that how hard I was on myself maybe allowed me to improve maybe rather quickly at some point. When I was 17, like I had never made a rep team. Even when I was 16, I got cut when I went out for a rep team. So I had never played on a rep team until I was 16. And I got cut, and I went home, and that was the first time, guys, I was really discouraged, and I thought hockey wasn't for me. In fact, I already had a life plan. I wanted to be a park warden in Banff or Jasper or, Yoho or Kootenai, something
It's a
like
good
that.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the holidays that we took as a family, right? So I fell in love with the mountains. That was a gift my parents gave me, and I'm happy to say I've passed that on to my girls, and my brother has passed on the same gift to his kids, his boys. But so I was really, really hard on myself. So anyways, I get cut that day, and I'm discouraged for the first time, and I get home, and I tell my brother I think I'm quitting. And he says, just give it one more try. Another team has heard that you've been cut, and they want you to try out. So I kind of reluctantly said, okay, I'll go. And I went the next day. And to my surprise, they only had one goalie. I don't know what the deal was with that. I have no idea. I just know I showed up. There was one goalie, and I made the team. And so we ended up having tremendous success that year. We ended up, after a slow start, we won the city championship, and then we went on to play in Calgary against Mike Vernon's team in the provincial championships, and we won. And then I was invited back then. You guys remember there was no Western Hockey League draft, right? You just get sent letters. So I got sent a letter from New Westminster, and I got a letter from Medicine Hat. I chose Medicine Hat only because it was closer, and also because they weren't as good a team. But I had no idea I was going to play in the Western Hockey League, right? I was hoping to play for the St. Albert Saints in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. It was close to home. It was an incredibly competitive league. And much to my surprise, I go to Medicine Hat in September. And by the way, Jeff Marshall, that guy I was having that conversation with before joining hockey, he was also invited in Medicine Hat. It was kind of a cool journey. But so the second day, Vic Stasiak is the coach of the Medicine Hat Tigers, and he calls me into the office. And you can imagine my experience, right? I always get cut. So I'm thinking the second day, this makes perfect sense, right? I'll be going home later today or tomorrow. And Vic sits me down, and in about 2 minutes, he says, I've made the Medicine Hat Tigers. And I'm flabbergasted. And I'm kind of in shock. But the coolest part about that meeting, it lasted about 2 hours. And Vic Stasiak, because of his history, he told me stories about Glenn Hall and Terry Sawchuk, goaltenders that he had played with in his career. I was fascinated, right? So I'm hearing about people that I'd only heard about and just idolized. And anyways, I told Vic at one point that we have a problem. It's great news that you think I can play for the Tigers right now, but I thought I was getting cut, so I came to Medicine Hat with just one pair of jeans and 2 T-shirts. So I ended up going home later that week, and Doug Smeaton, the general manager, drove to Edmonton to meet with my mom and dad and my brother and I, and go over, what this might mean. It's a big step, right? You're 17 years old, and it was a hard journey. I remember being terribly homesick for the first few months, and wondering if this is the right decision, and we were a bad team, and just lots of questions. And I look upon it now when I think, even when my kids went away for school, and how hard that was for them, and how hard it was for us as parents. And it's just it's a big thing to do, to leave home at a young age and try and find your way.
No doubt about that, Kelly. Who were some of the goalies who influenced you, maybe in terms of style, especially when you were starting out? I mean, everyone in road hockey, everybody has a favorite. Who was yours?
Jacques Plante and Bernie Pront. Jacques Plante originally, and I was so amazed one time, Ken. Remember when the Edmonton Oilers were part of the WHA, but at one point they weren't even called the Edmonton Oilers. They're the Alberta Oilers. And so they had a team, and Jacques Plante played for the Alberta Oilers for a year. And we didn't grow up with a lot of money, but somehow my parents were able to get enough money together. Again, my buddy Jeff Marshall and I went to a game, and I got to see Jacques Plante live. That was a game changer for me. I bought his book. I think it was simply called Goaltending. I learned that was something I studied virtually every day, about skating techniques and C cuts and the push and all these different elements of goaltending and skating. And then, because one of his proteges was Bernie Pront, and almost identical styles, right? So then when Bernie Pront was with Philadelphia, well, I liked him when he was with Toronto and so on, but when he was with Philadelphia and they won the cups, and so I just idolized him as well. And much to my surprise, when I now made the New York Islanders in '83, I think it might have been a year later, Bernie Pront somehow found out that I had idolized him for years and years and years. Now, he's the Philadelphia goalie coach, right? But he was kind enough, one day we're getting off the bus in Philadelphia at the Spectrum, and he sort of stood kind of by the Zamboni and kind of hid a little bit because it would have been kind of awkward if the Islanders coaching staff would have known that Bernie Parent is going to say hi to me because we had a game in 2 hours. But anyways, he was kind enough to come over and say hi, and we kept that tradition alive for many years. I was just so thrilled and that he would take the time to say hi to me and wish me well.
So Kelly, you have this interaction with a legend that you respect at the same time as you are walking on, and so I shouldn't say walking on, but you are making a team and starting out with a team that is chock full of legends. I wonder what it must be like to be a young man. To walk into an NHL dressing room has to be intimidating, but to walk into that dressing room with those names, what was that like?
I had some good advice for myself. Shut up and listen and watch. That's basically what I did. I was shy kid anyway, so that the part about not talking much was pretty easy for me, but I was just so thrilled, and I just watched all those guys and tried to sort of mimic their behaviors in how to get ready for a hockey game. And there are certain people that I admired a little bit more because there's more in style with my thinking and how I approach the game. But I was given a gift also. That first year I was drafted in 1980. Back then, by the way, even though I was a second rounder, only usually first rounders would go to a training camp. You had to sort of bide your time, and whether I was going back to junior, I knew that, or spend time in the minors before you get a chance to go to a training camp. And so I was fortunate. The Islanders invited me to training camp in 1980, and I see the schedule, and there's a preseason game in Chicago. And much to my surprise, the day before, or I guess 2 days before, they go, "You're going to Chicago with the team, and you're going to start the game." And I'm thinking, what? My first training camp, I'm going to play in the first preseason game. So on the way to Chicago, it was commercial airlines back then, of course, and I'm sure this was done on purpose. I was in the middle seat, and Brian Trottier was to my left, and Mike Bossy was to my right. I mean, talk about what you're talking about, Sean, with all the legends, and here I'm sitting beside two of them. And I've always said this, and I think it's kind of corny but kind of funny, because Mike Bossy, I think a lot of people kind of thought he was a great player, there's no question, but he was kind of on the slight side, and that's because he looked it on the ice, right? But he wasn't. He was about as fit a guy as you could get, and I remember he had a golf shirt on the plane, and I kept looking at his arms. They were just huge. Like I've never seen arms like that. I've never seen a guy fit like that. But I guess the most lasting memory of that trip, I played the first two periods. I let in 5 on 36 shots, which not bad considering, right?
Yeah.
But at the other end of the ice was Tony Esposito. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm on the ice with Tony Esposito. I'm on with all these other Islander legends. And by the way, playing in that Chicago stadium was, magical, and going down those stairs and walking up the stairs to get to the ice surface, just everything about it was memorable.
Man, memory lane. The Bossy Titan Turbo was my go-to stick,
right?
In minor hockey. Love that.
Do you remember how heavy it was, Ken?
Indeed.
Right?
The red. That's what taught me how to have a slap shot well before the graphite composite days, for sure. Man, talking about goalies, Kelly, this is great memory lane stuff. What was it like to be around Billy Smith, who carried himself with a different kind of intensity maybe than some goalies of his generation?
He was fantastic for me to learn about not only the position, the pressure, but how to keep your job. And why I bring that up, it's very, very important. So at some point, when I got there, by the way, I think that first training camp, I was like 6th or 7th on the depth chart. So there was Billy, there was Chico Resch, there was Richard Brodeur, there was Jim Park, Rolly Melanson.
That's a tough list.
Right. I'm looking above me and thinking, that's a lot of guys to try and go for. It didn't seem really reasonable or possible, and I think I'm missing one other guy that was in that on that training camp roster. Anyways, once when it's down to the three of us, Billy, Rolly, Melanson, and myself, and then they finally traded Rolly, and my career started to move up and up, and at some point I started to get a little bit more ice time than Billy. And this was really important for me. It was a great lesson. He didn't like it, and he wasn't giving that job away very easily. So I recall a couple times where I was told on the ice that I'm playing the next day, and we'd come in the dressing room after we were getting undressed, and I'd see Billy bolting into the coach's room, and he's going to give him an earful about how that's not right, and he deserves the ice time and so on. So I think the first time I allowed it to happen because I wasn't quite sure what was going on. And then I learned quickly, hey, when you see Billy Smith charging into the coach's room, you better follow in behind pretty quickly and stick up for yourself. And so the lesson I learned there was when now I'm the guy with the target on his back and people are trying to beat me out of my job, I was not handing that over very easily. I was fighting for everything to keep that job. And I'm happy to say I forced a lot of guys to improve their game and get better. In fact, Byron Defoe really credits me for having that attitude, because it was finally when I was actually let go in LA and they didn't re-sign me, Byron came to me and said it was those lessons that he learned that I wasn't giving my job away. I wasn't. You had to earn it. And so I was very proud of that.
Boy, it's amazing to see how those interactions with other players can entirely shape someone's career.
Right.
I wonder, so you're going into that office and learning to fight for yourself. It's Al Arbor, I guess, that you're going to fight with or trying to fight for. What did he mean to you in your career?
Oh, my gosh. He was an incredible man. He was, as I've always said, I had a great dad, and my dad was beautiful and, humble and nice. And in fact, I always kind of laugh. Before my dad got sick near the end, I never heard him swear in his life, ever. And then it was kind of funny near the end because he'd swear often. It was kind of funny. My family and I would laugh. But anyways, Al was different than that. Al was very powerful and so on. But Al reminded me of my dad. Like I always told Al, he was like a second father to me. And it was really cool to see how he treated us all differently. We all had the same rules, right? Like if you had to be on the bus at 10 a.m., you better be there at 5 to 10 or 10 to 10. And, all those rules were the same, but he treated us all differently. And in fact, he surprised me many times because I thought he was going to be more old school, yet he was more about the mental game. And I think he was way ahead of his time. So I remember one time early, might have been my second year in the league. I'm married now. We don't have children yet. And so my wife, Donna, and I would go into Manhattan on a fairly regular basis. We weren't partying. We weren't going to nightclubs. We weren't going to Studio 54 and those sorts of things. But we were going to Broadway. We were going to restaurants. We were trying to experience a city that we had never visited before, and a world-class city. And we're thinking, man, this is amazing. And so one day Al comes in before practice, and he looked like he had kind of a stern look on his face, I remember correctly, and goes, "How many of you guys going to Manhattan?" And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is a loaded question, isn't it? I put up my hand. Is he going to think we're going there, we're partying and we're staying up all night or something? And so I remember there's about 5 of us that kind of sheepishly put up our hand. He goes, "That's what I want to see. I want to see you guys having a full life. I don't want you thinking about hockey all the time. You've got to go into New York. You've got to try. You have to go to Broadway." I remember him adamant about that. He goes, "I want you to have other things in your life, other hobbies, other interests. I want you to be a well-rounded person, not just think about hockey." And he goes, "And by the way, when you're playing on a game on the ice here at the Nassau Coliseum, remember, those people are paying money. They're experiencing kind of like a Broadway play, but it just happens to be on ice. You're the actors. You're the people on stage." And it was just a really cool thought from a guy that I didn't think would be that way. And he surprised us many times with different things like that about, being a well-rounded person and so on. He was such a great man.
And just an incredible segue too, Kelly, in terms of you going to LA and seeing the growth of the game in Tinseltown, right, where it sort of became a place for actors and people, high society, to come to games. I just wonder and even too, whether it was Bruce McDonald, and what was it like to kind of be part of that scene?
Yeah, it was crazy, really interesting. I just remember. As a player when I was on the Islanders before Wayne arrived, right, you'd go to play a game in LA and there might be like 8,000 or 9,000, maybe a few more for the Islanders because they had been in the midst of winning 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. And there were quite a few people or Canadians down there that liked to go to the games. But not a full house usually. And so when Wayne's there, now you guys know the transformation there, and the fan base exploded, and it was really cool to see the growth. I think when LA first won their Stanley Cup in 2012, a lot of us were texting guys that were there when Wayne first arrived, and just to see the, LA go from, it was like a not much of a sport really in the LA area, Southern California, to a hockey hotbed, literally. And I'm not exaggerating. It's now incredible how many rinks. I think when I was in LA, we had the Great Western Forum, and there was the Culver City Ice Rink where we practice often. And I knew San Diego had an arena because San Diego actually had quite a hockey history with minors and so on. But to the best of my knowledge, there's only about 3 rinks in Southern Cal. Maybe another one but I did a project for somebody about 5-6 years ago, and I remember doing some research, and I think there's something like 60 different arenas now in Southern California, and many of them have more than one ice sheet. And so it's super exciting how the game has grown, and simply because of 2 people, Bruce McNall and Wayne Gretzky. And to see, as you said, Ken, with all the stars coming to every game, and it was a really surreal experience to meet a lot of these people and have them actually know your name, which was weird. I mean, I had never run into Mel Gibson. He'd, I guess, come to a lot of the games, and I don't recall meeting him in the dressing room after. We had this photographer that take pictures with all of us, with all the stars after every game, and which was kind of cool. I still have a lot of pictures, but my last year in LA, I blew up my ankle the day before training camp, so I was going to miss a lot of time. I didn't know it at the time, but it turned out to be 3 months. And so we have a home game. The guys go out for the start of the game, and I'm done my therapy, so I'm walking out of the dressing room, turn down this corridor, and it's a big, long corridor, and there's only one person in that corridor, and he's walking towards me, and it's Mel Gibson. And I'm thinking, that's kind of cool. And I get close to him. He goes, "Hey, Kelly, how's your ankle feeling?" So that was cool. So we had a nice little chat, and there's so many different weird experiences like that.
This sounds like a weird experience to me. You're talking about like the effect that players have had on you. You're talking about the celebrity kind of angle. Was told to ask 2 stories that maybe would kind of fit in, but I hear about a story about Barry Melrose and Tony Robbins getting you out of a funk in '92. I also heard something about Sly Stallone giving you a pep talk. So where are you getting these kind of celebrity boosts that helped you in your hockey career?
Okay, so I'll start with Stallone. So I think it would have been, I think we were leading or heading into the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe after one playoff game, and he was there. He had a bit of an entourage, and they were in the dressing room, and it's hard to explain, but our dressing room was kind of like set up like this. I sat right over here, kind of by the door to walk out to the ice surface, but there's a kind of little nook in there that you could sort of hide. And so that Stallone was there because I think our coach at the time was saying something after the game, but it was kind of lighthearted. So it must have been leading up to the playoffs. It wouldn't have been after a game. And Bernie Nichols saw him, and he goes, "Hey, Sly, give us a pep talk." So, he and his, he's got a big personality, right? So he comes in and starts talking, and I kind of remember one of the stories, but I'll leave that alone. But it was just hilarious, and put us in a really good spot. And I remember one time also, before I get to Bruce and Tony, so we lost a game at home, and Tom Webster was our coach, and he wasn't very happy with us. But at the same time, Bruce Springsteen was kind of standing in that little nook, and so he can see me, and Tom Webster couldn't see Bruce Springsteen though. And Jimmy Iovine, I don't know if you know who he is, a great producer. He was with Springsteen, and so they're standing there, and Tom Webster starts ripping into us, and I look over at Springsteen. He's got this real look on his face like, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I should be here." And I just kind of like, "It's okay, just it'll be over in a minute."
Wait it out, yeah.
And Webster is done. And by the way, I love Tom Webster as well. Just a wonderful man. We miss him dearly, but he's done, and he walks out, and Bruce says something to me, "Kelly, can I come in or something?" I go, "Yeah, come on in, no problem." So then anyways, going back to meeting Tony Robbins in 1992-93, this is my mental health story. So I have my More Good Days ball cap on.
Excellent.
Yes. And so in the summer of 1992, I started to have these thoughts. I was entering my 10th year in the league, and I was having these thoughts that, geez, I wonder if I can keep this up. I wonder if I can continue to play at this level, and all these negative thoughts, and they're going round and round and round. Caitlin, our daughter, taught us about the loop, and I didn't know of the loop. I didn't know how to break the thoughts in my head. I didn't know. They just went over and over and over and louder and louder and louder as the season began. Finally, we were in Milwaukee in late November of 92. We had gotten off to a great start, and I was actually playing really well at the time, but we were there for a neutral site game. The night before a game, my life became really tough. And, somehow I got it together the next day. I know, in fact, I was the first star of the game. We beat Chicago, but I was off, and I was in a ditch in no time, and I couldn't get out of the ditch. And I was, having all these bad thoughts, and I was sure my career's over. But Barry Melrose was very much like Al Arbor. He knew there was a mental component to playing this game, and that was a really important part of playing well and being relaxed and in right mindset. So in about mid-January, we're playing at home on a Saturday afternoon against New York Rangers. Rob Stauber's playing. I'm backing up. And I'm in my dressing room stall about 2.5 hours before the game, taping my sticks, drinking my coffee, and in walks Barry Melrose, and right behind him is Tony Robbins. I knew of Tony Robbins from all the infomercials and so on. So they walk in, which wasn't unusual. We had stars, celebrities in our dressing room before and after games, so that was not unusual. So they go into Barry's coach's room. The door closes, and about 30 seconds later, the door opens, and Barry waves me over. And I'm thinking, this is honestly how negative my thought process was. I'm thinking, well, this is weird. Why would Tony Robbins want to meet the worst goalie in the National Hockey League?
Oh.
Right? So that was the depth of my situation. And so I walk in there, and Barry introduces me to Tony. And he says, I really want to find a way to get you out of this spot. Would you mind working with Tony? And I said, of course I would. I was open to any suggestion, right? Like, I didn't like where I was. I didn't like the feeling. I didn't like the game had me on my knees. So I was more than willing to get the help. And so Barry said one other thing. He said, you don't have to, but would you mind if I sat in here? Would you agree to that? And I thought, for sure. You're my head coach. You better find out what I'm thinking. And you kind of have the right in my mind. And I, by the way, I had a really great relationship with Barry anyway, so that was cool to start with. And so then I sat in a chair, and I knew what Tony was doing, right? So he's 6'9", and so he stood up above me. So I understood that power dynamic. He wanted me, and so it was kind of cool. And then we just started talking about me, and it was really cool. Dug deep. I can't remember how long the meeting lasts, but and I was able to meet with Tony a number of times after that, one-on-one, which was a cool experience, and I don't think many people get that opportunity. And within about a week or less, my game really started to come around. In fact, my next start, I believe I won. I only gave up 1 or 2 goals. My next start, I lost 2-1 to Calgary. It was the day after our youngest daughter Caitlin was born. Now, there were some struggles. I got to tell you, it was great to get back on track to a certain degree, but there were some struggles. You don't go from being the lousiest to the best all of a sudden, right? So, by the way, that's the year we went to the finals. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think my teammates saw what Barry was like and the length in which he would go to help all of us, and so it was a really cool experience.
No doubt. I mean, obviously, this is a situation where we know we're not going to have enough time with Kelly here, but we would be remiss if we didn't ask you about a goaltender that plays in the Winnipeg market. Sean and I both, we'd love your technical expertise, but I'm also curious to your thoughts about the way that Connor handled the question about Carey Price at the end of the interview yesterday on Zoom. We know that there was an issue in 2018 where he kind of drew attention to himself and Marc-Andre Fleury, whereas yesterday he made it very clear that it was not his job to be assessing the play of the guy at the other crease. And Sean and I both thought that was just such a great sign of maturity and of a player who has such an important focus on what he needs to get done, because there's no win for him. If he compliments Price, it's not complimenting him enough, or now he's getting his opponent into his teammates' heads. I thought he handled that incredibly well. What were your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you. Your job as a goalie in the National Hockey League, in particular in a playoff series, is not talk about the other guy. None of your business. You focus on your job. I don't care what that guy's doing. I don't care about his reputation. I don't care about anything about him other than the only thought I have about the guy at the other end is when the game starts, and I would suspect almost every goalie in the history of the game has this thought just prior to puck drop, look down at the other end and go, my job is to outplay you. And that's how you start every game. And it becomes, because it is such an individual position to a certain degree, and I'm not going to get technical. I'm not going to talk about Hellebuyck and his style and what he does similar to other guys or different from other people. But I will tell you this, and I've been on air quite a few times in the last maybe year or two talking about Hellebuyck. And by the way, since you guys live there, you know him a lot better than I do. But I'm just saying, as an outsider, that I've gone to morning skates and I've also watched a lot of press conferences and everything about him. When I first introduced myself to him, maybe his first or second year in the league, I can't recall. I was there for a Flames game, and I went into the dressing room after the morning skate. I said hi, introduced myself, and you know what first struck me? I thought, boy, he's really shy. And I thought, I wonder if that's going to be okay playing that position, because that's a position where you've got to be really proud of yourself and, cocky and arrogant to a certain degree, and you've got to be the biggest believer in yourself, right? And so I was really pleased over the years to see that growth, how he looked to me anyways. You guys could correct me if I'm wrong. He went from being a pretty shy guy to maybe the voice in the dressing room, or at least one of them, a guy that you want to listen to because he's thoughtful. He's a take charge kind of guy. I love seeing some of the things he's done in the community. And he understands that importance. He understands kids in Manitoba really love Connor Hellebuyck for on ice and off ice, and he takes that responsibility seriously. And I said it last night before the game. You know what? He oozes confidence. I like that. And that to me isn't a guy that is arrogant and treats people poorly. It's a guy that believes in himself, and you better.
Kelly, you've had such a long, distinguished career in broadcasting, and because your life is so jam-packed, full of success and great things you've done, we barely got to it. I think that, and this is my take, when you came into broadcasting and in the game, your positivity shone through for me. I don't think I need to ask you where it came from, because you talked about your dad, and it sounded like that was a great place for that to come from. But I think sometimes, in doing journalism and doing broadcasts, you want to be able to call out things when they need to be called out. You want to be honest to your audience. How do you do it in a way where you're able to do that, but come across as just always being really positive and taking a great, tact on the game, as opposed to calling guys out and, giving people a hard time for the mistakes that they make?
I don't know how to answer that question. I do think I for sure go back to your assertion that it's with my mom and dad for sure, because they're just really nice people, right? So my brother and I were lucky in that regard that we didn't see our parents behaving, antisocial or anything like that. There's nothing. They're just really nice people. So I think that's where it starts from. But in terms of how I approach my job and how I am critical of people from time to time, I do try and look at there's plenty of things you can say nice about how they play and all these attributes they have, but at some point, and I don't do it often, maybe 3-4 times a year, maybe less now, you have to take a stand, and you have to, and I don't do it just because I haven't done it in a while. It has to be something that really affects me and that I feel I should say something in this case because I just believe in it. And so I do it. And but probably in my life, it's only been about 10 times, maybe 15, where I've really taken a stand and and have really gone after somebody. So I like to take the approach. I had this great conversation with Craig Button about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, because we're all still trying to figure out this profession. You guys know that. Every day seems to be changing, and the world's changing all the time. And Craig and I had a lengthy conversation about that, about when to praise, when to say something, how to say it, and it's a changing target, and I hope that I continue to find that target and not have too many missteps. But I will, because you're on live television, right? So you're going to do things, and hey, some people won't agree with it, and that's perfectly fine.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, well, I have to ask you. So we do this goofy little thing on this show where one night I left my workout headband on, and it became a thing on this show. But what I thought was really interesting is, like, so many people brought you up, right? And it's such a trademark here. So people wanted to know where the headband thing started out, and maybe if you could, take it into the style of you as a goaltender, because your helmet was really unique in a time where goaltenders started with different masks and it changed, but you stayed the same. So kind of go through the look of yours, because it is absolutely iconic and unique in the history of goaltenders.
Okay, so growing up, I always had long hair as a kid, which probably drove my mom and dad crazy, but they allowed it. And so when I started playing junior hockey, heading into my third year, my coach recognized that I was having a lot of problems with long shots. So he sent me to the eye doctor. I was given contacts for the first time in my life. So I was, 18 or 19, still had the long hair. And especially back then, because contacts weren't nearly the quality that they are now, sweat really bothered me. And you'd move the lenses around a little bit. So I was always trying to find something to wear on my head. So I started with just the regular headband, I think you call it velour or whatever it was back then. And I didn't find it all that absorbent. And so I kept trying over the years to finally find something that just felt like it absorbed more of the sweat, didn't create the problems with my contacts. And so one day at practice at the Nassau Coliseum, I remember it was an afternoon, and I'm thinking, this is just, I got to find something. So you remember those blue Stanfield's pajama tops that we wore underneath our equipment? So I took that and I simply just cut it up and tied it around my head and wore it in practice. I was like, holy, I might be onto something. I thought this is a little bit more absorbent than what I had been using. So I tried that for a while, and finally became something that I just started doing. And then I don't think it really became much of a trademark when I was still with the Islanders. But when I went to LA, and as you said, my helmet, and then I went to that really, what I thought was a really cool design, the Hollywood mask, and it sort of became a trademark. It looked kind of flamboyant. And it was kind of cool for a while, and then I got sick of it and I wanted to change. I remember when I was signed by San Jose, and we're sitting right actually at this kitchen table in the summer back then, and I mentioned something with some friends over. I said to Donna, and I think even our girls were at the table, I said, I think I'm going to get rid of the headband and just go try something else. And they said, no, you can't, Dad. I mean, it's kind of like your trademark. And so I reluctantly wore it for 2 more years, and it has certainly stuck with me. I remember I was fortunate, I guess, when the LA Kings honored me in 2013, part of their Legends Night. And they gave out a headband, the blue chiffon, as Don Cherry called it, to all 20,000 people that came to the game that night. So it was kind of a nice gesture by the Kings.
I would absolutely love to have one of those. We got to talk about your relationship with Ron. You've been working with Ron McLean for so long. Ron's a guy who can go in his own direction, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's very spur of the moment. You got to be on your toes when you're working with him. What is that like, and how did you adapt to that kind of environment?
Okay, so I go back to my first year on Hockey Night in Canada on the desk. I was 1995. I was still a player for the LA Kings, and we missed out from a playoff spot by 1 point. And we were in Chicago on a Sunday night. We lost to Chicago. We flew home the next day. I get home, and there's a call. My wife says a guy by the name of John Shannon has called, and so he wants you to call him back. So I knew John. I'd known John for a few years already. In fact, I think I'd known John for a good 6 years at that point. And so I called John back, and he tells me about they're going to have a brand new atrium show in Toronto to start the playoffs in the CBC building, by the way, if I didn't make that clear. And he wanted to know if I'd be interested. And I said, of course I would. I didn't have to discuss it with Donna or anybody. I knew I wanted that job, right? I was always hoping to get into broadcasting. And so he said, okay, but by the way, you're the second choice. You're Wayne Gretzky. We've asked to see if he'd like to join us. And luckily for me, Wayne declined, and I've been in broadcasting ever since. But to your question about Ron, yes, you have to have your thinking cap on all the time and be prepared and make sure you've done all your homework, because we kind of have this sort of unwritten rule, and always have whenever I started in 95, that he can ask you anything, and it's your duty to know. And so I've always been comfortable with that. Now, we basically, as you said, and Ken, you know, our show can go in any direction. The only thing is we kind of do follow a script in terms of, especially now, when I first started, it was Ron and Don, and then it was Ron and Kelly on alternating nights. So we didn't have panels. So it was actually quite a bit different. And so Ron would know the list I would have for all my clips in my 5 or 7 minute segment. And so we'd sort of follow an order, but if we got out of order and we got talking about something else, that was perfectly fine. Now with all the panelists, it makes more sense. It's more scripted, who's talking first and who goes next. And we hope we can still sort of ad lib a little bit. But anyways, yeah, Ron is amazing. You've got to make sure that that you're well prepared, because you don't know what direction he's going in, and he doesn't forewarn you, right? And that's okay.
Kelly, I agree with you. Ron is amazing, and you're amazing. This has been so much fun for us to catch up with you. And I wanted to say this. I'm glad you brought up so much to talk with you about. I'm glad you brought up the mental health angle. I love how you talk about it so openly on national television. I think it's important that you do it. I think you open doors for people. I think you've made it easier for people to handle those things. And I massively appreciate you using your voice and your platform to do that. It's what all of us should be doing with whatever platform we have, trying to make the world a better place. And it follows with the theme of you being the great guy that we get to watch on TV all the time. Keep up the great work, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're just so happy to have had you.
Sean and Ken, thanks so much. I really enjoyed my time. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the playoffs. We'll do it again, Kelly. Thank you.
You got it. Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
See you later. And we're going to bring in Mike Zeisberger, a guy that we can't get enough of. He was so nice last time. We're going to bring him in twice. Zeiss, how are you holding out, my friend?
Excellent work on the technical.
Listen, like really, look at the spot you put me into. Like, am I the shortstop that comes in after Cal Ripken here, or the first baseman after Lou Gehrig? I mean, Mr. Baseball in the center square here just plops me into this situation. But you know what? I'm ready to go.
Let's do it.
You guys can't keep me down.
Preparation is always the key.
We had to do a technical check before you hopped on the show, and it's a good thing we did, because the same issues we were having last time we were having again. But it was good because we got to talk a little bit, and one of the things that we were kind of talking about was this new world. We're doing this kind of stuff in this way, and you can't get into the dressing room. One thing that I hear time and time again from colleagues of ours in the industry is what a great job you do at developing sources. Now, I know Zoom makes that a little bit tricky, but I'm really interested in, without giving away your trade secrets, Zeiss, tell us what goes into developing a good source, earning that trust, all the things that you got to do to get guys to tell the great stuff that you get.
Well, first of all, who do I pay for talking to you? And number two, it's very simple. I mean, my mentors were the great Frank Orr that we spoke about the last time, who had a relationship to where the first time I ever went into a hockey dressing room, one of the first times into an NHL dressing room, Wayne Gretzky walked up to Frank and goes, "Hey, Frank, what's going on?" And I'm like, well, one day I would like to be, somebody says that to me. Another one of my mentors was Bob Elliott, who I still consider to be, in any sport, the best guy at getting sources and kind of lingering in the background while all the scrums are going on, so he can get the one thing that he needed from that guy. And I mean, if one of your mentors is the only Canadian writer that's in Cooperstown, I think you're following in good footsteps. And then guys like Scott Morrison and look, some of it has to do with how long you've been in the industry, because a lot of the guys that you cover as players end up being scouts and coaches and general managers and things of that nature. But, everybody does their job differently. I'm a social person. I like to, interact with people and not in at least socially is one thing. The more the merrier. You guys know that firsthand. But when it comes to, doing your job, I like to talk to a guy. I like him to know who I am, so that he can equate when he sees something in print, put a face to it. If he doesn't like something, well, here I am. Let's talk about it. I do not like the anonymity of some people that take shots at in print and then aren't there to stand up for themselves. But yeah, that's just it's a lot of things that come into play. And moreover, like I said, when I was young and I saw some of the best guys in the industry doing it, it was like, you know what? I'd like to be like that someday, where I can just phone up, the way I can now, like a Doug Armstrong or a Jim Nill, or we can go down the list. And they're not in fear of they know who I am. They know the product that they're going to get. It's whether they agree with it or not, they'll know I'll try to be fair. And that all those things in a long-winded way combine to the way I like to do my job. And like all of us, it's very difficult to do on Zoom because it's taken that social aspect away that I kind of thrive on.
Yeah, that whole, treat people the way you want to be treated, Zeiss. That's something that you had a big influence on me with, and, that's the kind of person you are. And, with Bob having an influence on me as well. I got the...
Well,
Yeah, I got the reputation of having a bonus round for most scrums, and it became a bit of a running joke. That's from Bob and from yourself as well. How does the industry get back to that mentality that treat people the way you want to be treated? Or you see it, it becomes antiseptic when it's only a Zoom call. How do you see this coming out of the pandemic?
You know what, Ken, I think we're sailing through uncharted waters, and I think the fact that we're in the era of the Zoom call now because of the pandemic, coupled with social media, which is just continues to explode, which for the most part, I'm all for social media. I think it does a lot of good, but it's kind of exploded in a negative way too. And I'm going to give you an example. Obviously in Toronto, let's just say the natives are as angry as I've seen them in over 2 decades of being around the Maple Leafs and being able to cover them. They feel like they were sold a bill of goods. They feel as if they've seen this movie before. The analogy that I use is you can redo the movie Titanic as many times as you want, and you can get new stars, you can change the cast. The storylines within the movie can be changed, the romantic threads and all that. But at the end of the day, the boat still sinks, okay? No matter how many remakes you do. And that is the way that people here feel, which is fine. But some of the stuff that was being said on social media about Austin Matthews and especially Mitch Marner, look, those two guys are the 2 highest paid guys on the team. They combined for 1 goal. And from a hockey sense, you cannot have that. Your best players have to be your best players. As cliche as it is, that's fine. But when you looked at their Instagram accounts or stuff that was going on Facebook, especially on Twitter, taking runs at their families, taking runs as them as human beings, I think that's garbage. I said so as much I put out a tweet and something on Facebook. The tweet got over 2,000 likes where I said, look, fans have every right to carve up players when they don't produce. I truly believe that. Okay. Hey, we were all fans at some point. We love the game, but we were all fans at some point of a team. And you expect guys to perform. So if you want to criticize them for performance, that's one thing. But these personal accounts and bringing family into it, and like, it's heinous. And the anonymity of Twitter sometimes makes it even more so. So I just said, look, you have every right to do this as a fan on their performance. In fact, you should when you see guys underperforming. But some of the personal attacks were garbage. And I know in Marner's case, he befriended when he was in and I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's something that is near and dear to me. But when he was with the London Knights, he used to tour the local hospital, and he met a little girl named Hayden Foulian, who I believe at a year and a half was diagnosed with leukemia. And when I went down, as Mitch got into the NHL, I went down and did a story with them, and I kind of fell in love with this little girl. And I saw how much that Mitch Marner did for this little girl who didn't ask to have this heinous disease eating away at her, and it's a sad story. Mitch did everything he could. Mitch was her best friend. She used to call him Mitch 1-2, Mitch 1-6. I should get the numbers right. Hayden passed away a couple of years ago, and her mother, Lindsay, who I've become friends with, saw my tweet and told me that, she stuck up for it and said, when people were going after this tweet, going like, oh, they deserve everything they got, Lindsay puts out a tweet saying, look, I'm the mother of this little girl that Mike had the photo of that died 2 years ago, and I know how much Mitch did. Lindsay told me that on the day that Hayden died, Mitch sent a little taped and video message and for Hayden, and it may have been the last time that she smiled in her life. And I know Austin Matthews does a lot of things at sick kids too, so I know fans can't separate church and state sometimes, but sometimes there are people behind this, and like I said, go ahead and rip them if you want for them not being able to play up to their expectations. Okay, they make good money. Okay, they should be able to take it when they don't produce. But the personal attacks, and here we go again, about circling back to what you had asked me before I went on this rant. But in the Zoom era that we're in now, I think that social media has a bigger impact now. People go to it, and it can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. So, and that is my 15-minute rant for the day. And I'm sorry if I was long-winded there.
Not at all. Zeiss, one of the things I love about you is your positive outlook, the positivity that you look at. And I like how Ken brought up, one of the things that he learned from you, because that is Ken. Ken is for sure the guy who's trailing behind and getting the good conversations in with people while everyone is doing their thing. He clearly learned well. When you've got the experiences you had learning from guys like Frank, or you've got the experiences you had with Ken, I can tell you, when I first met you, I've been reading you for years, and I get this giant guy with a great smile who comes over and made me feel like so welcome, even though I barely knew you. And it was like friendship with you is instantaneous because you're such a good guy. I wonder, from going from Frank and what you learned from him, and passing stuff on that to Kenny, and welcoming guys like me, what do you feel your role is in an industry where sports, you'll agree with this, by the vast majority of people who are in this business are great guys and gals.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel your role is in welcoming and mentoring people into this business?
I don't know if it's a role. I saw the way that those guys welcomed me in, and I like to do the same for others. Now, when they, I think it's changed a lot, or since even when the two of you got into the business, in that there's a lot of people now getting into the business. Not that there's a lot of jobs in it, as we both know, but when I started, I had to do stuff like high school and track and field events, and you worked your way up. That's just the way it was. And I know for Ken too. I mean, I can't speak to your climb up the ladder to the Mount Olympus that you're on now, Sean, but with Ken, I know Ken had to do the same, and that's what you did. And I find a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are select people that come into the business thinking like, okay, I got the main for the Stanley Cup final now. Like they just come in and think, okay, right to the top. And that's all fair and good. But when you see that people appreciate, or the younger people that ask you questions and they appreciate that, and you identify some of the skills that maybe even they don't know that they have, it's a pleasure doing it. And it, I don't even see it as a role. That's just who I am. And I know that's just who Ken is. And I know, Sean, that's the way you are. But there is a line. If you see somebody, whether it's because of ego or because they don't want to hear it, that's fine. I mean, you know what? I'll wave the white flag or tissue as the case may be and say, okay, you know what? Screw that, you go on your own path. But if you want to, if you want to ask questions in that, I'm there for you. And I got to say, one of the guys that's been that way is one of your coworkers at Sportsnet, Luke Fox, who came into the business, a little later. And I remember a couple of years ago in his first year, he was at I forget where we were. We were on the road somewhere, but guys are stopping to talk to myself or some of the other media, whether it's players or coaches, and Luke said something to the effect of, it's I just don't know anybody and I would like to. And I said, well, you know what? When they see you around, especially on the road, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, but when players or executives see you on the road, and there's not these big throngs around, you have a better chance to develop relationships with them. And Luke's done a hell of a job with that. Like a lot of the Sportsnet staff, I think he's a wonderful writer and he's starting to come into his own. But, he was very humble at the time, but also he wanted to learn. And I think that's a big thing, because there's a difference between wanting to learn and coming in thinking you already know everything. And we all know people, their names will be not said to protect the guilty. But we all know people that think they know everything, and none of us does.
Yeah, as obviously we were colleagues at Post Media, but I know you had a important decision that you made. I mean, I'm coming up to a year anniversary since my layoff. I mean, for you, knowing the ever-changing landscape, what was it like to leave a job that you love to go to the digital side and the online job at NHL.com? And how tough a decision was that to go through?
I mean, it was tough. I mean, there were a number of issues that played into it. Number one, I was the caregiver for my dad, who was, after he had a stroke and he was in his early 90s, I was his caregiver for 5 years. So, you didn't know how much travel you could do or something. He ended up passing away after I made the job switch, maybe 5 months later. But he's not suffering. He's in a far better place. There were financial considerations that played in it too, but a lot of it was, as you know, Ken, I mean, being at Post Media at the time, I mean, you would literally there was a 2 or 3 year period there where you would literally like wake up or go into the office and there'd either be an email just saying about how there were cuts like all across the country. And this didn't just happen once. It was 3, 4 times with people. Some of the people I'd look at and just go, these people are way, way, way more talented than me. And there just doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. And whether that was going to happen to me or not, I just didn't, as Ken can attest, there was a lot of uncertainty there. And, I had a good job, and the NHL came to me, and they were very, very generous in their praise and their offer. I'm 58 years old, but I still want to do this for a while, and so I crave the stability. There's positives and there's negatives, but especially, and I know Sean, you and I were talking about this earlier off the air, but we have lost so many good colleagues who have lost their jobs in the last 14 months. And even when the stuff was going on at Post Media, I could never foresee, none of us could, what would happen with COVID. And so, so happy that Ken has landed on his feet because he's gone through the roller coaster a little bit the last couple of years. But I guess the bottom line is there's a lot to be said for stability in an industry, in a world that doesn't have a hell of a lot right now.
Yeah. The one thing you'll know about Ken Zeiss is Ken grinds. He grinds and he works for every single thing that he gets. I've told him time and time again, I'm lucky to be able to partner with him because he's
Andrew Kopp.
Yeah, he's a grinder. He works for what he gets, and he's doing a great job.
He's got a little bit of the flair. He can dipsy doodle dangle when he wants to, like Nick Suzuki in Game 1.
He can do it all. He can do it all. That's the beauty of Kenny. Hey, I want to dig down a little deep into the psychology of Zeiss and see where music kind of has affected you over your career. Because if I'm not mistaken, you grew up a banger. You liked your rock and roll. I'm a closet metalhead, and it kind of works its way out every once in a while. I was told to ask about your musical leanings when you were growing up, and maybe your prized denim jacket with the patch. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Someone told me to ask you that. If that doesn't make sense, then let's just kind of give me an idea.
Patch on my denim jacket, but the music stuff, oh yeah, like growing up in Scarborough. Are you kidding? In grade 8 at our graduation, they said we could decorate the stage any way we wanted to. And so therefore it was a slam dunk. It was the inside sleeve of Led Zeppelin 2 with the stairs and the pillars and all those things. And yes, I mean, Rush, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, we can go down the list. I love those two bands. I still do. I don't necessarily consider them to be metal from the aspect that, when you got into the 80s and the 90s and the thrash metal and the hair band, so to speak, yeah. I wasn't really into that. And, but no, those are my my musical tastes, like everybody else's, have spread. I remember the first time, I went to New Orleans and started hearing like Zydeco, and it might have been the first time that I've ever seen somebody play an accordion where I just didn't go, because it was really, really cool. There's a guy playing a washboard, for Christ's sakes, and it was great. It was so much fun. And that was before I had drank my 9 or 10 Hurricanes, so he's still fairly lucid at the time. But yeah, like I'm big on things like the, obviously the Tragically Hip, blues music I enjoy. So it's branched out. But yes, I mean, and Led Zeppelin will always be gods to me, and anybody that says differently,
they're wrong. They're wrong. It's that
Oh,
simple.
I just stayed silent because that's all.
Yeah.
His eyes silent. That's something that doesn't happen.
I came short of musical. Yeah, I know. That's a shock.
We stumped Zeiss. There we go. This is
there was no stumping.
Down. Yeah, mark it on the calendar.
Well, Paul Maurice is a big Led Zeppelin fan.
Oh,
Zeiss,
yeah.
as you know, you got some great perspective from covering Paul in his Maple Leafs days. What do you remember about that, and how has he evolved in terms of his dealings? In dealings with the media, and also in terms of maybe how he runs his team.
I can't remember if it was Paul's first or second year with the Leafs, but we're at training camp at the arena where the Marlies play. The Leafs were having training camp there, and he sat up there and he goes, "This is the most talented team I've coached." Now, he had gone through the stuff with Carolina and that, but he's sitting there in front of the Toronto media, first day of training camp. "This is the most talented team I coached, I've ever coached. I think we're going to do well in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I think we can make a run at the Stanley Cup." And it's like, do you know your market? Do you know where you are to say something like that? It didn't work out that way, but I learned a lot from Paul. Paul's a very, as you guys both know, a very personable guy. If you can get the right time and place, and he lets his guard down, he's wonderful. You can learn a lot about the game. He had followed kind of in the footsteps of Pat Quinn, and those were physically and theoretically big shoes to follow in. And I think he's evolved as a coach. They always said in Carolina that he was just the defense first type of guy, but I think we've seen flashes in Winnipeg where he's got that elite top six that he does now. That there are times where he goes, "Okay, boys, we're taking the lasso off, hit the gas pedal." And one thing I know about Paul too is that he cares, and if there are things that are going on in the life of a media member who he respects, he will reach out and be supportive. I'm not sure if that's the same way in Winnipeg, but I knew that was the way that he was in Toronto. And I think he's a hoot. I mean, I watch you guys anyways, but his post-game press conferences, you just never know what's coming, and it's great. I mean, and especially in a Zoom era where we don't get to have that vibe of being in the room with them.
Zeiss, you talked about the Zoom era. One fine day, I very much hope that era is going to be over, and we're going to find ourselves somewhere on the road, on a patio, doing what I think we do best, even better than our coverage. We are at our prime when we are out afterwards, just like the time all three of us were at Ferris Wheelers with a whole group of people. It's great to have you back on, Zeiss. We wanted to catch up with you, and we wanted to make sure we gave our viewers the full dose of Zeiss, because you're a great human being, a great journalist, and you're a great talker. It's been phenomenal to have you on, my friend.
So when's my statue going to be done?
We would need a lot of marble for that statue.
Now, that may be the most ironic, funniest thing I've ever said. But no, hey, listen, guys, I love coming on. I think I was just on audio the last time, which is probably a good thing for the viewers who can now see the real McCoy. But you know what? I was going to pitch something about hey, let's do a regular gig when the Leafs play the Jets in the second round.
Wow, nice. Yeah.
But listen, keep it up and keep kicking butt, guys. I mean, this is a great thing that you're doing with two talented people, and journalists, but even better people. And you know what? Now it's my time to throw all the compliments at you, but they're well grounded. So thank you so much for having me on.
Well, we appreciate it. Kenny could get a big head from that. I'm a grounded guy. I'll take that properly, Zeiss. But great to have you on, Zeiss. Great to see you, my friend. Looking forward to that fine day in the future. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. And one last thing for Kenny. Hey, Kenny, I know you're a big ball fan. even Don Mattingly can't stand watching it when only 26% of the time something happens. So can you do something about that, please?
We're working on it.
Thanks.
Working on it.
Thanks, guys. And listen, be safe and all the best to your families.
Enjoy the playoffs.
Same to you, Zeiss. Thanks for joining us, bud. The best. That's just how it goes. The best. I mean, give me a little bit of the background on yours and his relationship, Ken, because I know that you guys have a background. I don't think I've ever fully dug into it.
Yeah, I mean, Zeiss was. I mean, when I was covering the minors, I got to know him a little bit around. I was always a person who, when the Moose would play the Marlies, they would often play on a Saturday afternoon around 3:00. So, as someone who wanted to cover the National Hockey League, Brian Munns and I would go to the Leaf skates. I mean, didn't matter. There was nothing to do with us, but we wanted to be around the NHL arenas. And Zeiss is a guy that kind of looked out for me. He knew that I got to know Bob Elliott a little bit. I mean, Bob, the dean of Canadian baseball writing, was someone who I didn't know really personally, but I sent him an email one day saying, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago for a Moose game. I noticed that he was covering the Yankees and Red Sox epic season, so I was like, well, hey, if you need help, I'll go to the Moose were supposed to play in Milwaukee the day before Game 6 against the Marlins, which was the infamous Steve Bartman game. Obviously not unbeknownst to us at the time.
Right.
I'm like, oh, hey, Bob, I noticed that you stayed in New York because I think that was the year where they came back from 3-0 down. So he ended up staying in the East after covering the start of the series. I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to be in the vicinity. I can help you out. And he got me the press pass and always looked out for me. And one other day when we were covering the Moose after a Jays game, Bob meets Gary Lawless and I. We go for Chinese food at 1 a.m. The Moose had played in Rochester, and Bob's like, okay, let's meet here, having never met him in person. And then after that, Bob would come down when the Moose were in Hamilton, and we'd go for lunch. And both those guys were such great influences on my career. And they're people that keep sorry waiters, I had the years mixed up, but there was a year they were playing each other. Red Sox and Yankees were still, I think, playing a series in 2003 as well. But just great people who always looked out for me. I mean, whenever there was a NHL beat opening, Zeiss would let me know. I mean, Bob was a guy who was looking out for me. He knew how much I love baseball. And Bob, one day I get an email, the Oakland A's are looking for a beat writer. You should apply. These guys were, most importantly, they were great friends. They were great people, and they were an incredible support network. And I'm really privileged to know them both and to call them friends. I mean, they're two great titans of the industry. They happen to work under the same post-media umbrella that I worked at, but people that really looked out for me over the course of my career, and were always there for me when times were tough or when times were great. I mean, they were always great to provide great resources in terms of advice, and most importantly, just great people, and I value them both very much.
That's well said, Ken. We should value those relationships that we have as we value the relationship we have with our chat room. I love what they said there in response to Zeiss. It's their job to keep our heads in check. They most definitely do that, as waiters just showed to you there, calling you on your ear. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always great to interact with you. Again, we don't go to your comments as much because we're trying not to distract our guests, but we're watching. We're hearing everything you're saying, and we appreciate you being along for the ride with us. You will find us again. Come check us out. We'll be doing some stuff on Sportsnet tonight after the decision comes down, which we are expecting, I don't know, any time at this stage, Ken. But other than that, you will catch our next Kenny and Renny pregame show on my Instagram account 45 minutes before the game on Friday, and our postgame right where you're watching here, either on Ken's Twitter account, my Twitter account, or the best place to watch us is at the Kenny and Renny YouTube page. While you're there, click subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you tomorrow.